The modularity element for a PC enclosure has really evolved over time. You've seen, hard drive cages that can be relocated elsewhere to allow for extra clearance, better airflow, etc. Motherboard trays are now becoming modular so you can invert the system. But what happens when you move that whole modularity element from the interior to the frame level? So behind me are all the parts for Riotoro's new enclosure, the Morpheus, a fantastic play on words and the model name for an enclosure that can morph into two form factors, so well done there. It comes disassembled, which I'm assuming is because you can decide whether or not you're going to go for the small form factor or the slightly bigger one, depending on your hardware. It comes with a mouse mat. I haven't found the instructions yet, but I'm hoping this could be it. Oh, mistake. Now I'm actually really excited about this whole dual form factor approach and, let's say being able to collapse the frame if you don't need that additional height, or extend it if you need that additional clearance for thicker radiators, for example. And I'm hoping Riotoro have done their homework to make sure that this whole convertible approach is actually functional and not just a marketing gimmick. Riotoro's case history has not been exactly positive in my eyes, but I'm hoping the Morpheus bumps them back into this competitive sphere, because the convertible market for the frame itself is definitely rising, and I'm thinking people are expecting some sort of modularity that is beyond motherboard trays and hard drive caddies and stuff, and I think this is the future way to go. All right, let's check it out right after this. What would you like? So I'm looking for a gaming headset with a bit of everything, but not overkill. Something that folds on your neck. Sure. How about the light frame without excessive clamping force? Yes. Comfortable ear cushions with proper internal padding? Excellent, I will take. The cable and the microphone are removable. Fine, this is the one. Multi-platform compatibility with virtual surround sound dongle available. Can I just take one? And the sound quality you'll be satisfied with. So the new Cooler Master MH751 and 752 are here to make your gaming experience. So this, my friends, is the Riotoro Morpheus, a patent-pending convertible PC case with a brave price of $189. I appreciate what they're trying to do, and this will definitely entice other case brands to pursue a similar, nature in terms of making something modular on the frame level and not on the interior. But this price premium, is solely based on that convertible factor because the build quality and the overall user experience, it feels a little bit less. For example, the build quality of the Define S2, which is $149, is far superior, and also that whole refinement on the user experience just feels better. However, Morpheus comes disassembled, which opens up opportunities for modding and those wanting to get that full PC building experience. So it is made entirely of steel with some plastic front and rear pieces, and I actually love the fully perforated design with all sides fully covered in dust filters, and it's kind of refreshing not to see a tempered glass panel, and the side panels are made of 3 pieces since you can extend the outer sections. So it is a heavy panel but not reinforced and therefore a bit flexible. But I appreciate the magnetic dust filters that also cover the expansion areas if you decide to go the second form factor route. The red anodized thumb screws for the side panels are a pretty nice accent to this all black frame, with black thumb screws also available, plus the Illuminate front logo is red. It's tasteful, but I prefer it disabled. Now I appreciate Riotoro's unique take on the user's manual, this being the actual mouse mat, but having only 4 paragraphs of descriptive text for the assembly process without any visual aid is just unnecessary. It's more of a hassle than anything. Also, what is this piece? Alright, so we're on the website right now. Maybe they'll have something here so I can see the Morpheus case and look. Oh yes, spec sheet, excellent. Oh wait, it's just a sales kit. So I did get the user manual from Riotoro, but even without the visual step-by-step guidelines, the whole assembly was pretty straightforward. All the pieces just basically kind of align and you screw them in place. And this is where you need to decide how many PCI slots you need, since that determines the form factor. By default, the bracket with 5 is installed, but it can be swapped out for this one with 8 slots. And what we're left with is a spacious interior for a micro ATX, ITX, or full-size ATX/eATX motherboards with bottom 2 PCI slots covered by the frame in the smaller configuration. It still leaves enough clearance for cable management with ATX motherboards, but notice this is an inverted layout, meaning the GPU will be up top, and it would have been so awesome to have the option to rotate the motherboard tray as well because of this whole modular frame, but it's not. It's inverted layout and it's locked that way. Now, the one surprising thing about the Morpheus is the I/O and how it's kind of like 2 steps forward and 1 step back. So the step back part is all this lighting control for the optional RGB hub that is not included. So you need to get that separately and use this connector. Otherwise, it's pretty useless. And on the other side, the step forward, are 2 USB 3 ports. And for the first time I'm seeing this, 2 Type-C Gen 2 ports, which is awesome. But most motherboards only have a single front I/O Type-C Gen 2 connection. And this has 2 cables. So you need to find either a PCI add-in card with the Gen 2 speeds for the front I/O connection, or find a motherboard that has 2 of those, which is quite difficult. And most of the motherboards I have right now only support a single Type-C for the front I/O, and so that renders the second Type-C port on the top I/O useless. Now, the cooling options for the Morpheus are a bit disappointing. For the price point, I was expecting more. So you can do a 240 or a 280 rad up top, but also keep in mind the GPU is in this area as well. The bottom has fan holes for 120 and 140 mil fans, but for some reason, the spacing is non-standard, maybe because of those individual dust filters, but you cannot mount a 240 rad here, only 120 or 140 singles. And because of this dual chamber design, the main section is thinner than usual, so we only get an 80mm fan mount for the rear, which by the way is included. And finally, for the front, there are mounting holes for a 200mm fan and this removable bracket for dual 120s or 40mm fans that installs behind this large plastic housing for this LED logo. You also cannot easily remove the front dust filter, and because of the perforated design, any illuminated fans will shine right through. And by the way, there are 2 standard red LED fans included, but they're nothing special for the price point. The rear section holds your power supply, there are cable management Velcro strap hoops, and 2 drive cages, one for hard drives and one for SSDs. And if you end up extending the frame, you can fit a second SSD cage on top of the first one. There is a lot of wasted space here though, just because the frame is so long. And what would have been really good to see is an indented motherboard tray to increase CPU tower height clearance, because it is very short in the main chamber. So you can see my 145mm tower extends beyond the frame. However, because of the flexible side panels, I was actually able to force mount it. The official spec claims 122mm of height clearance for the CPU tower, which is not a lot, so you might as well go for, water cooling, but you can only do one at the front and maybe at the top given the GPU clearance and all that. So cooling in this case, it could have been better. Cooling options, that is, because the temperatures in this whole perforated design are actually pretty decent. So with the side panel removed, I was running 3 degrees cooler on the CPU and 4 degrees cooler on the GPU. So pretty decent. There is some restriction going on with the front panel because there's the metal frame, the dust filter, and more plastic pieces on the exterior. But the good thing is the bracket for the front fans is slightly spaced out, so they're not necessarily too much against all that restrictive stuff. And also keep in mind the frame is basically open, so any noise from your system will be audible because it doesn't necessarily condense it all inside the case. Now, to extend the frame and turn it into a slightly larger enclosure, you don't necessarily need to even disassemble the entire hardware. You can do it even with everything installed. Some things might get loose a little bit here and there, like the GPU has to be removed, so you can substitute back that 8 PCI slots instead of the 5 here. And the motherboard tray, because it's attached to the top and you have to install the additional expansion bracket, it's possible you don't necessarily need to remove everything, which is nice. And so with the expansion in place, I'm having a hard time on why you'd want this. The obvious benefit here is the additional clearance above the GPU. So if you're installing like a slightly thick radiator or dual graphics cards with some fans for exhaust or intake, that is a possibility. But expanding this top section does not grant you any additional airflow options. So you still only have a 240 or a 280 mount for the front, nothing for the bottom either. And so it's basically just exactly the same frame that is slightly taller and, gives you access to 8 PCI slots once that expansion is installed instead of 5. And you also get additional SSD cage for 2 more SSDs. And so that, I guess, is fine. But look at all this space. They could definitely figure it out to place, let's say, standard SSD caddies or something in the space so that you don't necessarily need to expand the height to get that additional storage capacity. And so with the 2 form factors side by side, the difference in height is only 6 centimeters. So it's not a lot, but it would grant you additional clearance for the top if you're doing radiators there and want a little more spacing from your motherboard area or from the GPU. So if you're doing multi-GPU setups. So that's the only reason why I can think why that would be beneficial. But it is kind of disappointing not to see this taking a step forward, you know, because this whole expansion thing in height is very surface level. Now, as for the system itself inside the Morpheus, I like it. No issues here. Plenty of space at the bottom so you can route those 8-pin cables and anything underneath for the power supply. All the rubber grommets are in like good locations. And so I decided to pursue this whole red illumination route because of the front logo. Unfortunately, it is not RGB, but I have the TB RGB NMAX fans at the front and the top. Absolutely love how they look. And also, you know, because the perforated design, they peek through, which is awesome. I have the Lee 24-pin RGB connector that I set to red to match all my other illumination, and also kind of peeks through the interior and spills quite nice light between the hardware. And for the Thermaltake power supply, that also has RGB illumination on the interior, so I set that to red so it can shine a little bit of that ring illumination from the fan onto the exterior because of that perforation. And you can check out all those RGB goodies in the description below. Wow. Could this be the one? This actually is the LandCool One. The case with a fantastic front panel design with a brushed aluminum plate, complementing airflow and the gorgeous RGB illumination through the central cavity. We've got a Type-C port at the front, a capable interior for water cooling and airflow, and a totally flush glass panel on the side. And to spice things up, the Lee streamer cables give off unique RGB illumination for 24 and 8-pin cables, controlled via the case lighting or through its own controller hub for this interesting color spill on the interior. And you can check them out in the description below. And so the Morpheus to me is such a good idea, but I think the convertible factor has to be taken a step forward, because imagine if this was like an ITX form factor that could extend to ATX. That would have been slightly better, not just vertical expansion, but also horizontal. And this whole perforation multi-paneling layout allows for that to happen. And Riotoro's first step is exactly that. It's pushing the boundaries on what we think would be the next step in modularity for PC cases. And I really admire them for doing something like that and being brave, because, you know, there are a lot of compromises here, but I'm hoping this whole concept will, you know, push many other brands to go a similar route. I'm still confused about the dual Type-C for the front connections, because not many motherboards have the dual Type-C for the front I/O. And also, you know, for $189, you're definitely paying the premium for the convertible factor, which is nice, but then it's very surface level. For example, having that additional height would have been the perfect opportunity to mount a 360 rad at the front, you know, maybe with a little attachment for the main 240 bracket, but that is not possible. And I would love to hear what you think about this whole dual form factor convertible PC frame. Let me know if this is something that's interesting you, and let's say if it was refined and you were able to extend the front section or collapse it even a bit more. Do you think that is something that more people would be interested in versus just having this 6cm height difference? Let me know in the comments below. I'm Dmitry, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.